Thank you, Claire. Thank you to Claire, the DuPage Tea Party, everybody who put together this great event. I mean, I grew up in DuPage County, and I know this area pretty well, and I didn't even know this place existed. This is an amazing facility. This is very, very cool. So it's great to be here with you. I wanted to come in on the cage. I wanted to be lowered in on the cage, but I didn't bring my go-go boots. But I want to know, I kind of want to know what that's for, too, in this facility. I'm very interested in what is happening here. Yes, that's true. Yeah, I did go to Northwestern, Sex Toy University. Yes, that's right. So before we get to the speakers, I just wanted a kind of a little real estate notice. There is a townhome for sale in D.C. for $2.5 million. If anybody is in the market for a second home, it's fascinating. Jesse Jackson Jr. bought that townhome for $500,000. He's selling it for $2.5 million. We all know how great the real estate market has been over the last several years. So it's always amazing to me how, whether it's cattle futures or real estate, how the political class always seems to be just in the right place at the right time. It's fishes and loaves type of stuff. It's very interesting to me. And if I'm a bit distracted today, I hope you'll bear with me, but the story this week that Jesus Christ may have had a wife is a little distressing to me for this reason. The excuse that I've been using with my mother for the reason that I'm 40 and single is because that Christ never had a wife either. And so that may be, I don't want that taken away from me. So I have dispatched my own team of biblical scholars and archaeologists to make sure that 4th century piece of papyrus is proven inauthentic. So just I have that on my mind as well. But before we get to the speakers, and we have a great lineup of speakers, starting with Charlie Kirk, who I'll introduce in just a couple of minutes, I wanted to offer a little bit of my perspective on things 45 days out in DuPage County, which is the most Republican county in the state of Illinois, but less and less so. So the idea that we can just lay back on our hind legs and assume that conservatives and Republicans will win in DuPage County is simply no longer the case, which is why your activism, your presence here today, and your activism for the next 45 days is so critically important. And I think one of the things that we have an opportunity to do in these elections this year that are ours to win, the legislative elections that are ours to win, congressional elections that are ours to win, a presidential election that is ours to win, but they're not ours to lose. And I think what we need to do in order to close the deal, to win elections that we should be winning, is do a little bit better job of defining who we are positively, proactively, and where we would take the state, the country, were we entrusted with the reins of power. And so I think about this because for too often, and too often I see Tea Party members, conservative grassroots, rank and file Republicans kind of define ourselves in the negative abstract, right? We say we're not Chicago Democrats, the people that have destroyed the state's economy and that who we exported to do the same thing nationally. But that's a weird way to describe yourself, isn't it? When somebody asks you what you do, you don't say, I'm not a drug dealer, right? You say, I'm an accountant, I'm a lawyer, I'm a small business owner. When somebody asks you how your children are doing in school, you don't say they're not in detention. You say, one's studying Shakespeare, another's an avid reader, one's on the honor roll. You define yourself and those around you positively for who they are, not who and what they or we are not. And so in the closing 45 days, as you are controlling your vote, and that's the call for all of us, control our vote like a ward boss in Chicago, but within your circles of influence, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your co-workers, your co-volunteers. You have a trust relationship with those individuals. You need to control that vote and bring that vote to bear, whether early voting starts or on election day. And that multiplier effect of people who are informed, who are hyper-engaged, which is everyone here, has a huge potential multiplier effect if we can bring people's activism to bear by controlling their vote. And just real quickly, I wanted to talk about a few principles I think inform who we are as opposed to this continuing conversation about what and who we are not. This innocent bystander routine that we try and do to say, well, we're not in power, we're not the Chicago Democrats, so we're absolved of responsibility. We're not. We're not. We're responsible for what happens on our watch as well. We're responsible for who represents us in state government and federal government as well. So let's take some ownership of it. Think about principles that drive policy choices, values. I mean, think Rahm Emanuel is even talking about values. He uses that parlance all the time. Now his values, I think we would agree, are markedly different from ours, but it should be instructive to us that he feels the need to talk in the language of values. We should as well. Let me give you a couple quick examples. We should keep promises we make and not make promises we know we can't keep. I mean, this is a simple kind of kindergarten rule, but this is a revolutionary idea in Illinois. So the reason that we have the highest state deficit per capita and the lowest credit rating, the reason over the last 30 years only Michigan and Ohio have created fewer jobs than Illinois, the reason we have $9 billion in unpaid bills and $200 billion in public pension and healthcare liabilities is because we don't abide that simple principle. It's really that simple. And so this provides a contrast. Say, this is who we are going to be when we are in charge of government, and the reason that we have what we have in this state in particular is because we have a political class that doesn't abide that simple rule. How about aligning the government with the interests of the productive citizens in this state, in this country? Paul Ryan was speaking to this in his speech at the convention when he said, and this was underreported, but when he said that we need a president who is aligned with the interests of the American people. What he was talking about is that we have a government that is on the same side of the skirmish line as the productive people who are paying all the bills in this country. And so think about what we have in state government. We have a government that runs scams on people, has to come up with new and exciting ways to extract wealth from people because you can only do so much politically directly. You know, after you've raised the personal and corporate income tax as much as they've raised it, you got to be more creative. And so that's when we raise the cigarette tax. Because the cigarette tax is raising it as a message to say, please don't smoke. Bad for you. It imposes costs on our healthcare system. We're going to raise the cost on buying cigarettes because we don't want you to smoke. Except, please smoke. You have to smoke. We're counting on you smoking because we have already budgeted for and spent the money we expect to realize from cigarette tax revenue. Don't gamble. Please don't gamble. These are tough economic times. The money you make sure you take care of your household bills, pay your mortgage, squirrel some away in savings, because we need to be very judicious with our resources. So don't gamble. Except, please gamble. You have to gamble. We are going to make it easier for you to gamble. We're going to put lottery tickets online. We're going to put video poker machines everywhere somebody has a six-pack. We're going to put slot machines every square mile, and new boats are coming in every community that can support them. Because we have already budgeted for and spent the money we expect to realize from gaming revenue, because we believe this is the only way to finance the status quo we otherwise understand to be untenable. Don't turn right illegally on red lights. Don't speed through school zones because we want to protect kids and it's about traffic safety. Except please make illegal right turns on red lights. Please blow through red lights. Please speed through school zones because we have already budgeted for and spent the money we expect to realize from red light cameras and speed cameras. A great man once said that Illinois isn't broken, it's fixed. That great man, of course, was me. And what I think I meant by that is that you have state government and politicians that are fleecing, treating as pigeons the people who finance the state government that they realize very little in terms of benefit from. And that's what's got to stop. So you need to have politicians, political leaders, elected officials who align government with your interests, not treat you as somebody to be fleeced, somebody to play one more game of three-card Monte with. And the last one, and the biggest one of all, is please buy a home, drop roots in the community. Please, home ownership is the key to the American dream, and we appreciate you buying homes, but I'm sorry, we may have to now confiscate your homes. I mean, that's essentially what the pension pushdown legislation that's been proposed in Springfield offers to do. We are going to use your home as collateral for somebody else's guaranteed pension. And so when you see your property tax bill go from 5 to 7 to 10 to 12 to 15% of your mortgage, that's what's happening. They see your home as useful may be useful to you, but is particularly useful for them to help sustain promises they made that they knew they couldn't finance. And now they're running out of options to finance them at the state level. So it's time to confiscate your homes to make sure that they keep their promises to their core political constituencies at your expense. So if the prospect of having your home liquidated for somebody else's public sector pension doesn't animate you and your neighbors, then frankly, I'm a bit at a loss. I don't know what will. And the last principle I'll offer, a little bit of jujitsu, I think, in the public mind, which sparks interesting conversations if you attempt it, is that we take care of the truly vulnerable because that's what you do in a free society, in a civilized society. And that's not what we're doing in Illinois. In Illinois, in fact, we are 51st out of 50. Not an Obama moment. We are also behind the District of Columbia when it comes to providing services to persons with developmental disabilities. So this is very interesting to me because as I understand it from the Chicago Democrats, they are the party of the social safety net. They are the party of the truly vulnerable. They are going to make sure people who need state services through no fault of their own are provided with those state services because, as I said, that's what you do in a civilized society. And I agree with them. So here's the rub. How do you explain, as I mentioned before, highest state deficit per capita, lowest credit rating, $40 billion in bond debt, $9 billion in unpaid bills, $200 billion in unfunded pension and health care benefits, and that's all after we passed a $7 billion tax increase. So after all of that taxing and spending, after all of that borrowing and spending, if the truly vulnerable were a constituency you cared about, then how could we be 51st out of 50 in providing services to those individuals? You see how those things are incongruent? You see the paradox there? And so I thought about this for a while, and I figured out how to reconcile these two seeming contradictory ideas. And you know what explains it? It turns out that Democrats are lying. It is a revelation, I know, but we guffaw about it here, but I would question you. How many people in your circles of influence that I talked about before do you think know that? Do you think know how barbaric we have become as a state? And I mean that term, barbaric. Because when you use the least of my brother in the ecumenical sense of that phrase as cannon fodder for a big government agenda with no intention of serving their interests, of providing services they should be provided, then you have become a craven, barbaric society. And as I said before, the people in charge may be first in line in terms of bearing responsibility, but all of us are responsible for what happens on our watch while we're here. And if that doesn't animate you, the liquidation of your home doesn't animate you, then I don't know what will animate you. But the one thing I do know is that when people provide you the intersection point to talk about elections from state rep to Congress to the presidential race over the next 45 days, you have an opportunity to tell people who we are and who we aim to represent and what we would do in furtherance of that representation. And I hope you'll give due consideration to offering more than just, I'm not a Chicago Democrat. And with that, I will turn it over to our first additional speaker after my little diatribe, which I have to get out of. The 2 hours on the radio is not enough. We do have a great lineup, and this next speaker reminds me of a young me, except he is smarter and more